Pillars of Eternity was born of nostalgia, and now it's become a source of it itself. Around its 10th anniversary, I gave the game another shot because I was actually disappointed with it back in 2015. Much to my surprise, Pillars of Eternity was very different from what I remembered. Some things felt better, others worse, but it definitely was an interesting experience to revisit it. So without further ado, let's take a detailed look at the love letter Obsidian Entertainment wrote to the Infinity Engine games. Pillars of Eternity is set in Eora, a mostly standard fantasy universe created by Obsidian Entertainment. While in Planescape Torment belief can shape reality, in Eora it's soul energy. Everything we would consider supernatural, like magic, is powered or influenced by soul energy. Unsurprisingly, the main questline revolves around souls and soul-related conditions, which work very well in making the player character special. They are not a chosen one, they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As a result, the protagonist can interact with the spirit world and other people's souls. On top of that, they remember one of their past lives, allowing them to discover long-forgotten events. But as awesome as it may sound, such a gift can be a curse in disguise, giving our character a compelling reason to pursue the antagonist. They may not care about the fate of the land, but their own is on the line as well. The story takes place in a country called Deerwood during the so-called Hollowborn crisis. Hollowborn is a term for a child born without a soul, and while it is a known condition, it's never happened on a large scale like that. Given Deerwood's most recent history, many people believe that this anomaly is a god-sent punishment. You see, in Eora, reincarnation is a commonly known fact. It's part of a process called the Wheel, which is a very apt name because reincarnation is normally a lottery, unless something powerful, such as a god, intervenes. At the same time, animancers, who are scientists who research souls, are diligently looking for a cure. But it's an end justifies the means type of situation for many of them. As you can guess, the tensions are brewing in Deerwood. This is when the protagonist arrives in the country, apparently ignorant of the Hollowborn crisis. They arrive with a caravan of settlers invited by a local lord. To say that fate hates their gods would be apt because our first quest is to look for herbs that, quote, calm the insides. As you might have already guessed, it's a calm before the storm. The shit hits the fan soon and the actual adventure begins. Jokes aside, the part of Eora that we visit feels very authentic in terms of politics, history, technology, or even language, although have fun pronouncing some of the names. This is apparently pronounced Cane Gula. A nice touch that gives Deerwood a unique flavor, but in my mind, a Cane Gula is just a banshee. Technologically, Deerwood is a rough equivalent of the early to mid-European Renaissance. Most notably, firearms are increasingly common. They turned out to be a great equalizer against wizards and their arcane veils. Anyone wealthy enough could pull a gun and say, "Dodge this." It always bothered me why nobody tried that in the Harry Potter universe. Anyway, in terms of level design, the hand-drawn maps are gorgeous and really convey the atmosphere of the place. Most of the time, we travel the wilderness and ancient ruins though. Outside of them, there are small towns that mimic Baragos, Nashkel, and East Haven. The first city, Defiance Bay, feels like compressed Baldur's Gate. The other one, Twin Elms, looks like the Rampart from Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Sadly, all settlements in Pillars of Eternity look good, but they feel like movie sets. Confined and lifeless when actors are on a cigarette break. It feels very BioWare-y and not in a good way. It shows that the game was way overscoped. But how is it when actors are back on the set? The story of Pillars of Eternity and the White March expansion have very strong themes and explore them in interesting ways. The game doesn't pose a great question like Planescape Torment did though, at least not directly. I'd say it challenges common ideas about knowledge and truth. When you say, "the truth will set you free," the game asks, "will it? What if you don't like what you learn?" When you say, "ignorance is bliss," the game retorts, "is it? Or maybe it keeps you a slave." I think it works great because both the burden of the truth and the consequences of ignorance can be dire. Therefore, the answers to such questions aren't obvious, and they are very subjective. We are frequently put in situations, often in side quests, when it's not clear if honesty is really better than a lie, be it noble or blatant. We all know that dilemma, but being relatable is what makes the story of Pillars of Eternity good in my opinion. One of its strongest points is that we learn probably the biggest secret of Eora in the course of the game. A secret that could turn the in-game world upside down, but it also provides food for thought about the real world. Discovering the lore is a big part of the journey because it changes your perspective from the small picture to the big picture. As our knowledge and understanding grows, it turns out that the antagonist might be an evil bastard, but not bonkers. Better yet, they have a point too if you think about it. Deciding their fate can be tricky because of that. They are not the best Obsidian antagonist ever, but definitely a top 3. I also like how Pillars of Eternity explores knowledge of the ancients. It's very Renaissance-y, and I can just feel that touch of a pro-historian in the writing and design. It's also very relatable because if you look at, say, the Greek philosophy, the Roman law, or the Christian ethics, you can see how many things people figured out millennia ago. And who knows how much of their knowledge is forever lost to fire, water, or even time. Unfortunately, the story of Pillars of Eternity has several weaknesses too, characters being the biggest one. They are definitely works of competent writers who ran out of time. Under-edited is what I call them. There's just nothing memorable about most of them. For example, there is a character that serves a similar purpose to Deionara, but their delivery is nowhere near that level. There is no "I shall wait for you in death's halls, my love" line to still haunt you many years later. No music theme to really capture their spirits. Deionara's appearances in Torment were very brief, but they had huge impact thanks to perfect delivery. And delivery is often the difference between memorable and forgettable. At the end of the day, or the adventure, I believe well-written characters can save a mediocre story, but it doesn't work the other way. With companions, it's a bit different. Save for the Grieving Mother and Durance, written by Chris Avellone, they are underdeveloped. There's nothing about them that makes you want them in the party even if they are suboptimal choice. Say, Adair with his Marvel humor is just a poor man's Alistair from Dragon Age Origins. His companion quest has a very good premise and theme, but falls flat for me because it's too short and not impactful. It's the journey that matters the most, not the destination. But it's hardly a journey when it's a sprint instead of a marathon. I really wish the Grieving Mother and Durance were the standard Obsidian held their writers up to. Those are the most fleshed out companions despite enormous content cuts, on which I made a video recently, by the way. Moreover, I also think that Pillars of Eternity doesn't do a very good job of communicating the severity of the Hollowborn crisis. For example, in the original Witcher, which I reviewed a while back, the plague and its consequences stayed in your face. In Pillars of Eternity, save for a few quests, it's easy to forget that people are constantly suffering because their children are born soulless, a fate arguably worse than death. Such tragedies and people's reactions to them would make great side quests. Various kinds too, because a crisis like that touches the society in a number of ways, on different levels. I'd love to see more conflict between religious zealots and animancy sympathizers, more manipulators trying to profit off the desperate. There are just too few quests like that. Allegedly, this was intentional, as claimed by Josh Sawyer, and I'm not sure what to make of it. It's one extreme to make the game entirely about that crisis, and another to have most of the side quests unrelated to it, both of which suck in my opinion. Furthermore, choice in Pillars of Eternity is an illusion. The main questline doesn't branch at all, and your decisions barely matter outside of the end slides. It's an illusion of consequence of an illusion of choice. Everything you do or say accomplishes the same thing, usually a fight and a lead to your next destination. With side quests, it's better because a number of things like your class, reputation, or skill can change their course. But not all of them are like that though. Finally, I think Pillars of Eternity suffers because of its slow early game. Act 1 is very similar in structure and function to that of Mask of the Betrayer, but it's super dull when you compare the content. Going by Steam achievements, less than a half of players made it to Act 2. I suppose that rather uneventful main questline is one thing, but the slow and punishing early gameplay might be a big factor as well. And honestly, I think the gameplay is what potentially ruins Pillars of Eternity for mainstream audiences. The gameplay of Pillars of Eternity is a mixed bag. It's a nostalgia bomb for some people, but it otherwise belongs in a museum. You see, the whole idea of Project Eternity sold to Kickstarter backers was a game outdated by design. This locked Obsidian in a creative box which might as well have an Internet Explorer flyer in it. In fact, Josh Sawyer admitted on a PC Gamers podcast that Pillars of Eternity and Deadfire were the most compromised games of all he worked on. He felt that he had to make bad design decisions to make those games ultra nostalgic for a very specific part of the audience. A vast minority, I think. The Infinity Engine games had different qualities and we loved them for different reasons. Where I live, we say that some people like The Forest, others like The Forester's Daughter. I feel Pillars of Eternity caters mostly to one group. I won't say which, but the story of the game takes place in Deerwood and has no romance. So make of that what you will, and let's move on to the details. I'm going to start with combat because you'll spend a lot of in-game time fighting. The combat system feels like the next step the Infinity Engine games would have taken if their formula hadn't been obsolete by the time Icewind Dale 2 shipped. This means old school at best and ancient at worst. In terms of complexity, I'd say Pillars of Eternity is somewhere between Icewind Dale 2 and Neverwinter Nights. Pathfinder Kingmaker would also be a good comparison, I think. In general, the learning curve will certainly be gentler on you if you're familiar with those games. However, if you're not used to micromanagement and having to understand complex dependencies, you might feel overwhelmed at first. Most things are explained in-game with tooltips and whatnot, but that is still quite a bit of knowledge to absorb if you want to be any good in combat. On the upside, Pillars of Eternity is a lot less restrictive in character development than classic D&D games. There are few limitations in what you can do. It's more of a question whether you should do it. For example, you can have your spellcasters wear heavy armor, but it's not the best idea ever. Another thing that is different from D&D is that most talents and skills are not class-specific. Nothing stops you from having a priest being your party's thief, healer, and melee fighter at the same time. Also, stealth is a great investment in your well-being because you get to sneak past a myriad of trash fights. Considering that there are no sneaking penalties for wearing armor, it's basically a no-brainer for any party in my opinion. The reason you might want to avoid combat is that you get no experience points for that, which is the stupidest thing I've seen in any CRPG. I sneaked past tons of fights that could have been avoided. Now, before the actually guys storm the comment section, you do get XP for bestiary entries. Long story short, you research creatures' resistances and weaknesses by fighting them. It's a neat idea, but once you've completed an entry, which takes like 2 or 3 encounters, you don't get any experience for that type of creature. And there is a lot of combat in this game. A lot. And not enough creature variety to keep that XP flowing. Speaking of variety, Pillars of Eternity offers a good amount of classes and races to pick from. Obviously, the vast majority of them are RPG classics with different lore and stats. They are like ice cream with unusual flavors, but they are still ice cream. You know what they say, if something works, don't fix it. Unless you're Chris Avallone, then you're qualified to do that. Anyway, what's important, each character class is represented by a full-fledged companion, but you can also hire custom adventurers. This way, you have a lot of freedom in forming your party. Sadly, once you've gathered your party, you venture back and forth. Pillars of Eternity forces backtracking like crazy. See, a lot of those trash encounters I mentioned earlier exist for the sole purpose of draining your per rest abilities and camping supplies. And because you can only carry a handful of camping supplies with you, you can't rest until you find or buy them. There is no challenge in it whatsoever. It just kills the pace by having you, say, leave a dungeon and move several maps in both directions to continue playing. Honestly, the game just doesn't respect the player's time. You have to constantly wade through tiresome crap to get to the good stuff. Unfortunately, this is not the biggest problem with the gameplay. Pillars of Eternity goes out of its way to suck enjoyment out of everything with its terrible experience system. Questing is the main and the only meaningful source of experience points. You are awarded the same amount of XP for completing a quest, regardless of how you do it. Allegedly, this was meant to reward people who avoid combat altogether by sneaking. In practice, it only made sneaking and talking the most efficient ways to accumulate experience. Outside of mandatory fights and situations when you really want to tear somebody a new one, combat is just an annoyance to slow you down. Why not award points for skipping a fight with dialogue or staying undetected Deus Ex style? It's beyond me why Obsidian would take away the most obvious of rewards in the genre. Of all the wheels, they chose to reinvent this one and failed miserably. I really wish they had called it a day when they came up with the wheel. Another problem with no combat experience is the fact that it discourages exploration, because exploration means combat in this game. The level design is beautiful, and I'm sure it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you bet your ass I'm not going to explore and appreciate it if it means fighting a crapload of petty fights with no real rewards. Well, unless that was Obsidian's goal, to discourage art appreciation, in which case, congratulations on a job well done. But you know the funny part? Pillars of Eternity makes hating it difficult too. It's such a mix of ingenuity and horseshit. It's like there was an angel and a devil on Josh Sawyer's shoulders. The angel would say, "They have responsibilities and limited free time now, Josh. Go easy on them." The devil would say,
"You and my new serious but not."
As a result, Pillars of Eternity beats the Infinity Engine games in the crap design department sometimes, but other times it really improves upon them. In combat, the optional companion AI takes quite a bit of micromanagement off your back. There are different behavior patterns that you can set up for individual companions too. It's nowhere near as elaborate as what Dragon Age Origins offers, but it gets the job done. The only problem with it is that you'd think it's enough to click the icon, but it doesn't do anything until you set up the behaviors. It's a huge UI design mistake in my opinion. But anyway, should you find your party ineffective in combat, you can easily revert to level 1 and level them up again. And I love it. Real life is when you suffer the consequences of stupidity and ignorance. Games are meant to be fun. Moving on, the slow and the fast modes help with gameplay pacing. The former reduces the need to pause during combat, while the latter makes backtracking and sneaking bearable. The inventory system was also improved by the Party Stash, which is an unlimited share space with filters and sorting. But you can reject that gift, of course, and stick to the way of the ancients by limiting stash to cities and resting. Finally, Pillars of Eternity has super simple crafting. You don't have to buy skills, go places, or anything like that. Just gather the components and have the required character level. So it was possible to skip the annoying part and simply get to the point after all. Why couldn't everything else in the game be like that? Could it be Obsidian wanted to increase the playtime like that? Well, longer doesn't mean better, but you know, we got lucky as it is with those quality of life improvements. Obsidian had even brighter ideas to make us miserable. In the case of crafting, originally we would have to go to specific places to craft items, and items would also degrade over time. I'm sure everyone would love it. Speaking of ideas, namely bad ones, we need to talk about the Stronghold Management that Obsidian promised on Kickstarter. Kednua, that's the Stronghold, is probably the best example of blowing the time and budget on something neither useful nor pretty. Oh, you thought this was your Stronghold in Pillars of Eternity? Nah, this one belongs to some local tyrant. This miserable thing is your Stronghold. And it doesn't even matter what you do with it. Not in this game, not in the next. Kednua is ugly and there is no life in it whatsoever. You're the only inhabitant besides shopkeepers and hirelings, and your steward is a talking throne. You don't make any strategic or financial decisions either. For a long time, you splurge on fortifications that can't withhold a kobold with a kitchen knife. I don't have a degree in medieval fortifications, but a huge-ass wall is generally a pretty serious obstacle. But in Pillars of Eternity, enemies walk right into the courtyard like they own the place. And the best part is, we can build a hedge maze to the north to stop incursions from that direction. Like, what? Do we expect Kevin Malone to lead the assault? I just don't get Obsidian. The Crossroad Keep in Neverwinter Nights 2 was way more fun, despite the bugs. It made one feel like the master of the castle. Kednua feels like a bed and breakfast. I don't even know its target audience. People who like Stronghold Management will be disappointed. People who don't will just give it a pass anyway. Alright, so we know Pillars of Eternity can be difficult to like, but how difficult is it to play? I hate to say it depends, but it depends. The difficulty scales very well thanks to different settings, modes, and options. The best course of action is to establish your player profile and choose a combination that won't hinder your progress. For example, in 2015 I played on normal, but a friend of mine back then said that normal is for little bitches. In 2025, I thought maybe she was right, maybe I need to man up. Therefore, I chose hard with knockout injuries on because apparently my player profile is easily manipulated masochistic moron. Did I enjoy myself? Let's put it this way. The early game was a bitch for sure. It felt like the designers wanted to assert dominance by wiping the floor with my ego. It's puzzling why they put some of the most annoying monsters in our way that early. In mid and late game it becomes easier though. You can get away more often with frontal assaults and delegate the micromanagement to the companion AI. If you're looking for extra challenge however, Pillars of Eternity will hurt you plenty. Some fights, like bounties and the dragons, are optional for a reason. In those, sometimes you make one mistake and your party gets wiped out. And now check out the ultimate achievement on Steam and imagine there are troopers who unlocked it. They either know insane exploits or have like 200 IQ. Speaking of patience and dedication, Pillars of Eternity is a huge game. My recent playthrough on hard took me about 80 to 90 hours. It was a reasonably completionist run in which I did the vast majority of side content until I reached the level cap. From there, I proceeded to finish the game. I skipped a lot of bullshit fights though, didn't explore that much as a result, and didn't defeat all the dragons. However, if I were still afraid of missing out like I was 10 years ago, I would have surely sunk more than 100 hours into Eora. 120 if I had to make an educated guess. That FOMO-driven completionist run back when the game launched took me about 80 hours. However, I played on normal then, explored every nook and cranny, and the White March expansion didn't exist yet. But if you do only the bare minimum, Pillars of Eternity is not that long of a game. But you know who didn't do the bare minimum? Obsidian Entertainment. Pillars of Eternity has had absolutely stellar support, and at the time of making this video, Obsidian just announced a turn-based mode. In my recent playthrough, I was very pleasantly surprised to see how much work Obsidian has put into the game since I beat it on April 8th, 2015. They fixed bugs, added content, features, and quality of life improvements. I can't stretch enough how big of a game changer the companion AI was for me. So, if you are in the same boat as I was, trust me, Pillars of Eternity is a lot better today. Of course, the root cause of many problems the game had and still has was its insensible Kickstarter campaign. Unfortunately, Obsidian being Obsidian promised what they thought would be cool instead of what was realistic. $4 million considering US costs isn't that much with how crazy they went with promises and rewards. Blood, Sweat and Pixels by Jason Schreier actually mentions how they realized they screwed up by promising 2 cities when they finished Defiance Bay. But it was either delivering them or betraying the people who saved the company from going under. It's not the first time Obsidian miscalculated like that either. Check out my Neverwinter Nights 2 cut content series if you want to see how much they had to butcher that game to ship it at all. The time has come to sum this all up, and it's not an easy task. Story-wise, Pillars of Eternity tells a good, engaging story that has a strong antagonist, a convincing conflict, a great plot twist, and at least 3 memorable companions. It offers a great number of side quests too, but at the same time, it suffers from unpolished writing, lack of story branching, and a mostly mediocre cast of characters. It simply shows Obsidian did not have the time and resources to give the story and characters the treatment they deserved. Gameplay-wise, time has not been kind to Pillars of Eternity. Unless you like ancient mechanics like those in the Infinity Engine games, this can be a problem. On top of that, Obsidian made other questionable design decisions to say the least. Namely, awarding no experience for combat and the camping supplies based rest. Of course, there are some quality of life improvements like the companion AI, but they don't really balance the scales for me. Honestly, I treated the gameplay like an obstacle in discovering the story rather than a fun challenge. There are just too many annoyances in it for someone who is not stuck in the late 90s. I think the Steam achievements say a lot about the game's player retention. Fewer than half of those who own Pillars of Eternity finished Act 1, though some probably never even launched the game. About a quarter finished Act 2. Only 15% beat the game as of May 2025. With that in mind, if you need a backup plan, Steam is probably not the best option. Their refund policy allows only 2 hours of playing a game, and I know people who spend more time than that in the character creation. All in all, Pillars of Eternity's selling point was being the Infinity Engine games reincarnated, and I think it is that. They should have called the game Pillars of Infinity or Gears of the Infinity Engine. However, the caveat is that while it draws lots of inspiration from Planescape Torment, its writing is nowhere near that good. Pillars of Eternity had the potential to be great in its niche, but it has to settle for being good. It's a CRPG all-rounder for those who like the obsolete ways. But most importantly, it's a product of passion and the best Infinity Engine game successor that Kickstarter could afford. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my review, consider subscribing to the channel and remember to send your likes and comments to the wheel of YouTube algorithm. Who knows, maybe the Google gods will smile upon my channel someday.